The Sports Renegades podcast on SportsTownChicago.com.
Say what's on my mind at any given time of day, cause I'm a renegade. Never been afraid to holler about anything.
Welcome in to the Sports Renegades here on SportsTownChicago.com. I'm Ryan Stuprich.
And I'm Ryan Risky.
And we are back here for another show. And, of course, you know, it's holiday time, so there's a lot of good stuff going on outside the world of sports. But in the world of sports, especially Chicago sports, there's no better thing to talk about, no more entertaining thing to start off the show with than Chicago Bulls basketball, which has just been up and down and up and down. And
a lot of humiliating losses recently.
Yes.
And you and I experienced that firsthand. We went to go see Tom Thibodeau's return to the United Center, and you think the Bulls might do something nice for him?
Yeah, I was expecting a tribute video, which I heard that I thought they were going to do it, but they never did.
And then they announced Thibodeau's name as the coach of the Timberwolves. Everyone gets up, starts giving him a massive ovation. Then they just turn the lights off and start playing the Bulls intro, like literally, like just a bunch of just little bitter people thinking that just don't like him for no reason. It was really concerning for me. I was just thinking, like, you know, you literally are just trying to say screw you by doing that. Like, he has the second most wins of any coach in Bulls history, probably. It's definitely been his era.
No question
has
about
been
that. Yeah.
The best era since the Jordan era.
Right.
And then you pretty much are trying to ignore that it happened because Gar Forman and John Paxson got their feelings hurt.
Right, and of course, Tom Thibodeau said nothing but nice things, you know, during his press conferences before and after the game, and it's just like, you know, John Paxson and Gar Forman never treated Tibbs with that respect.
No, and the unprofessionalism back when Rose tore his ACL, and you know everyone's wondering when's he going to come back. The unprofessionalism where they just had Thibodeau try to fight off all the media questions about if he's going to return this season. Then where they should have gone out and said he's going to either return by this date or we're just going to not, or he's just not going to play this year. Like, because every day Thibodeau was answering those same questions about if Derrick Rose was going to play that season. He's like, I don't know. You know, we're waiting to see how he feels in practice. He's been one of the best in practice. We're going to wait for him to see how he feels, and
right.
He had to do that for every.
Well, that's the
game.
thing. Everyone felt like they had to defend him. You know, everyone felt like they had to defend Rose, and it shouldn't just fall on Tom Thibodeau to answer those questions every day, and they made him do that.
That's the job of your general manager or your vice president of basketball operations right there, because they should have gone out and said he's either going to return by this day or he's not coming back, or they should have been the ones answering those questions, because they were just letting Thibodeau do that while they sat back and did absolutely nothing and did nothing to improve the roster.
And now you go in, and this is year 2 under what should be career college head coach Fred Hoiberg, and the main issue I have with him, which goes back to last season, he doesn't know how to manage the minutes. Tibbs knew how to manage the minutes, and he did it excessively, sort of, but he also got the job done. They also put up a great defensive effort. This is sort of a complete opposite turnaround where it's all about the offense. There's no
defense appears optional at times.
Yeah, it's optional defense.
And back to the minutes, one thing that I find very concerning is your last 2 first-round picks, Bobby Portis and Denzel Valentine, are not playing.
Right.
That means your coach is not developing them properly.
Right, and I thought Fred Hoiberg was supposed to be the anti-Thibs with that, where he was supposed to develop these young guys' minutes. And I want Doug McDermott to be a good player so bad, but I just don't think it's going to happen.
I mean, I think he's going to be a good three-point specialist on the team.
Maybe, but he's not hitting this year.
Keep in mind they traded a bunch of draft picks to get him. They traded 2 first-round picks to get him.
Yeah, I'm thinking, now that I'm thinking about it, I liked the move at the time. I really want to like Doug McDermott. He's a Midwest guy. He went to Creighton. He was at a mid-major for 2 years before Creighton joined the conference that they're in now in the Big East. And it's just, it just hasn't worked out yet for him. He has been injured, but
he dealt with a concussion this year. Last year, though, he shot over 42% from downtown.
He was better last year for sure, and maybe he can get to that level. Because I think we've sort of lost faith in Nikola Mirotic to be the 3-point specialist, although he hit a few the last few games.
I think he got a wake-up call when he got a did-not-play coach's decision.
Yeah.
Which, it's getting ridiculous that I think that Bobby Portis is not playing. He was great last year.
He was great. He has a good outside shot, surprisingly.
And he can rebound. He can play defense.
Rebounder. Yeah.
And for whatever reason, Fred Hoiberg's not playing him this year.
No, and he refuses to play Denzel Valentine, which you have to develop your rookies, especially when you know you're not going to be, a number 1, 2, 3, or 4 seed in the East.
Right, you need to develop your first-round picks. Fred Hoiberg isn't doing that. Tom Thibodeau did that. Jimmy Butler was the final pick of the first round, and he's now an all-star.
Right.
He's the leader of the team. He's their best player.
No question about it.
He developed guys. He was good at, and they how many times did they just sign some guy off the street and then the next day he was making headlines?
Yeah.
That's about your coaching system and your scheme. That means you have a good system and a good scheme, and that you can really fit anyone into it as long as you can really just fit anyone into it. And right now, Fred Hoiberg's not developing anyone. They're not signing anyone off the street and doing anything. They signed Isaiah Cannon, and he's one of the most useless players I've ever seen.
I can't stand that guy. He was on the 76ers last year, and when you get, essentially cut by the 76ers, you're not going to be, a great player for the Chicago Bulls.
And Fred Hoiberg claims he's one of the best sharpshooters, and that he's shooting 25% from downtown, 36% from the field. And you want to know something? His career high shooting percentage is 40.6%. That is not a sharpshooter.
No, it's certainly not. And another thing, before we get to the Dwayne Wade comments about how he's mad that the fans are booing, going back to the fourth quarter specifically, I mean, if you're Cleveland, if you're Toronto, if you're Golden State, even if you're Houston this year, if you're San Antonio, maybe even Oklahoma City, you show up in the fourth quarter. And, if you're down by a little bit in the fourth quarter, you're expected to come back and win that game. And, that's when the good players show up in the fourth quarter. It's the complete opposite with the Bulls. They get off to these hot starts, and then they let the teams get back into it, and they let bad teams get back into it. We've cited off the examples like Minnesota and Dallas and whoever else. And they just can't score in the fourth quarter. And you have to be able to score in the fourth quarter in crunch time when it matters most. You have to put the teams away.
And this goes back to last year.
And they're not putting them away.
This goes back to last year. This isn't like something new. It's happened since Fred Hoiberg took over.
Right. You never saw that with Tibbs. With Tibbs, it was always a fight till the end. And, even if they didn't start off well, they always seemed to finish well. And, there was a lot. Yeah, I mean, Derrick Rose, for instance, say what you want about him. He had a lot of game winners. And
he was clutch, too.
They always came up with big defensive stops at the end. Now, of course, they ran into Miami and couldn't beat them, but that's obvious because you have LeBron James.
I mean, in every game, they get outscored in the fourth quarter.
I know.
Every
Nobody
game.
can score in the fourth quarter. Wade doesn't show up in the fourth quarter, which he needs to, and Jimmy Butler doesn't show up in the fourth quarter, which he needs to. You have two all-stars right there in Wade and Butler. I wouldn't say either is a superstar. But you have two all-stars there, and they need to be able to make the shots in the fourth quarter.
I think part of it
is
that they just think Butler's going to do it all, and he can't do it all by himself.
Right.
And they're turning the ball over too much.
And Butler's not necessarily
defense.
on that same level as, clutch shooting. I mean, he's a clutch shooter, but he's not like James. He's not even like Irving, technically. He's not like Curry. He's not like Thompson. He's not like Westbrook. He's not like Kawhi Leonard. He's not on that level yet. Now, can he be on that level? Yeah, and he's getting there. But, Jimmy Butler, it seems to me he's more concerned about driving to the lane and getting fouled, which is important. But in crunch time, when you need a big shot or something, he's not there for you yet.
Right, and he hasn't had as many opportunities as like a guy like Dwayne Wade or Derrick Rose or LeBron James and all that. And I think really it comes down to the roster that Gar Forman and John Paxson put together. It's not athletic. They made a commitment last offseason and said they were going to get younger and more athletic. So what did they do? They signed two guys that are over 30 to start.
I know. And then it just makes no sense.
And you don't even play your first-round pick. You don't even play him. So, I mean, as bad of a coach as I think Fred Hoiberg is, because I think he's a terrible NBA coach. It comes down to the roster that has been put together by John Paxson and Gar Forman. It's not good enough. They elected to not rebuild. They elected to go the retooling route, even though everyone clearly knew that that was the wrong route to go.
And, I mean, in the NBA, like, you're really going to, like, do this little retool here, retool there. I mean, that's what you do in the NFL.
Right, or you can do it in the MLB. It didn't work for the White Sox, except if you're John Paxson or Gar Forman and you decide to do that, there's I certainly hope there is no way that they actually think that this retooling is getting them onto the level of Golden State.
They're certainly never going to win a championship with this type of thing going on.
That's something you need to evaluate and decide if you think you can get to that level, and the answer is going to be no. There's no way they can retool and get the superstars necessary.
The question is, the Bulls, their goal is to get on Cleveland's level, but as long as LeBron James is playing and is healthy for the next, 5 or 6 years, they're not going to beat Cleveland out and go to the finals. They just won't. So you're looking at, another 5 years at a minimum, really. Another 5 years of not making it to the NBA Finals. And the Bulls, of course, haven't made it since 1998.
And I said it at the beginning of the season. I don't think the Bulls are making the playoffs. I didn't think they were making the playoffs. They didn't do enough to the roster.
I thought they were going to squeak in.
Hoiberg's a bad coach. The roster's just not good enough. It's not deep enough. I mean, whenever the second unit comes in, that's when they start blowing it. The second unit is not good. There's just not enough depth on it, especially at the point guard position. I mean, Jerian Grant has looked good at times, except for whatever reason, Hoiberg likes Isaiah Cannon more.
Refuses to play him. I don't know why he refuses to play Grant. Seems like he's your prototypical Rondo backup.
Yeah, which the Rondo signing is something to get to another day. That was a very poor signing.
Yeah, looking at the standings right now, the Bulls are a 7th seed currently. If the playoffs started today, which thank God they don't, they're 14-14 right now, and Atlanta's behind them by a half a game. Milwaukee's a half a game behind them as well. Indiana is 15-15. New York, the Knicks, are 15-13. So the Eastern Conference is still fairly bad. After Charlotte, there's kind of a drop-off here where these teams are struggling to be at 500. So, I mean, I thought the most positive outlook for the Bulls that I could give them is they would be, 45 wins and, a 5th seed, maybe a 4th seed, but probably a 5th seed. Now I'm thinking that they're probably going to get into the playoffs just because they do have Wade and Butler, and it's hard to imagine that those two don't go into the playoffs. But, I think they squeak in as a 7th or 8th seed.
I know. Last year, Rose and Butler missed the playoffs.
They did, but there was more internal dysfunction with that. I mean, there's dysfunction now, but it's more about fourth quarter scoring. There's not really an internal issue on who's taking what shot like there was last year.
Right. So, anyways, we're going to take a quick time out. We'll continue some Bulls talk.
Yeah, we got to talk about what Wade said.
Yeah, get some more Bulls talk. We'll have some baseball talk coming up. And end of the season for the Bears.
Woohoo!
Is Matt Barkley a future starter? We'll find out.
I don't know. We'll find out after this break on SportsTownChicago.com. It's Sports Renegades. The Sports Renegades podcast on SportsTownChicago.com.